Well, greetings and salutations, folks. I hope everyone is doing well, and welcome to today's upload. Before we jump on into it, a couple quick links. As many of you may know, I rely on Patreon, PayPal, channel membership, and the merch to help the channel to continue to grow and go. Links to Patreon, PayPal, and channel membership is in the description below, the merch displayed directly under the video. Also, Dogman Frightening Encounters, Volume 1 through 3, the audiobook versions. They were written and researched by Tom Lyons, narrated and produced by me, Jeff Nadolny. These audiobooks are available on Audible, Amazon, and iTunes, links to which are also in the description as well. Finally, last but definitely not least, if you'd really like to help support the channel to continue to grow and go, simply subscribe. It does not cost a cent. Click the like button, takes half a second. If you don't want to miss out on any of the informative uploads I put out daily, click the bell icon, and folks, please leave a comment and share the video. Why? Well, because these things really do help the channel to continue to grow and go. They definitely do matter and are appreciated. With that, I have taken far too much of your time. Let's jump in to today's upload, shall we? All right, so for a while now, I have really been bringing the channel to different places. Like I said, Dogman will always be what I focus on primarily because I had my own experience, because I know they exist. I'm not one of those channels that just talks about it because it's the trending thing to talk about. I had my experience in '94, and since day one of the channel, shared it. But what really fascinates me is every facet of the paranormal, of the supernatural, and that extends so far beyond what Dogman is. It is just a small pocket that fits into this larger scheme called the Luciferian agenda. And because for the longest time I didn't want to realize that, I didn't want to recognize that, I really kind of brushed a lot of this stuff off. Knew about it, not as much as I do now, which is, to be honest with you, very little. I don't think any of us know everything. Even the people that lived through it only know the portions of what they lived through. James Caspel, I did an upload on him the other day. He only knows what he's been told and what he lived through. The Montauk boys, Duncan Cameron, Al Bellick, there's Piero, Ed Cameron, Preston Nichols. You know, these are people, the shadow government, a hand of the Luciferian agenda, turned into super soldiers, killing machines. There's Project Camelot. There's so much more. I can't even really imagine, or, you know, it's so deep and it's so intense. You know, if you research about Andy Piero or Duncan O'Finian, he supposedly was an ultimate warrior, an ultimate super soldier, and was brainwashed, controlled by a highly classified MK Ultra project called Project Talent, which if I really, I'm going to do an upload on that very soon, but he was essentially a child super soldier. And when Montauk When the Montauk chair essentially destroyed the base, essentially just destroyed Camp Hero, because Duncan Cameron sat in the chair in the middle of the base and summoned a creature that destroyed the majority of the base. The government then put Dogmen. After everything was taken out, there is Dogmen in the vicinity of that base to keep what's in that base still secret, because they still house things in secret parts of that facility. That facility is closed, and it is a New York State park, but there are still things that are hidden below that base, and the government wants it protected because, one, it's too valuable to destroy, and they have to leave it where it is, because how do you explain if it is a defunct base sending a bunch of military vehicles into it and coming out with a bunch of stuff going right through the Hamptons? Like where Montauk is, it's essentially you've got to drive through the Hamptons. Or you're going to send some military boats, which then are going to be noticed. When Montauk Camp Hero was built and established, it was at a time where no one was asking questions. It was like life was black and white, just like the TV. Dad smoked 2 packs of Luckies, mom cooked dinner, kids rode their bikes and traded Mickey Mantle cards. And a lot of crazy, really disgusting experiments on human beings occurred. This is an experience that a couple of teens had at Camp Hero with creatures that protect the secrets that are still there. Today's first experience comes to us from a subscriber. Her son shared this with her. So it's second hand, third hand, I guess. He had shared this with her back in 2020 when it happened during the lockdown. And they live in the Hamptons on Long Island. Not a lot to do during the lockdowns. And apparently her son and one of his friends decided to go and explore and hike some of the many trails and areas around Camp Hero, which is where the Montauk project occurred. Now, it is sealed off with just probably tons of cement, concrete. All of the buildings are, sealed up, boarded up, and just almost impenetrable. But I guess you can get into some of them. Now, and they had been walking. They had parked their vehicle and walked in. And I guess they had parked their vehicle at the beginning, or I guess end of Colonel Dunn Road. I'm not familiar with the area. I've never been there. I do want to go there. And so they had walked in, and immediately they started to walk around the radar tower. And it was an evening. It was a crisp evening, a fall crisp evening, probably late summer actually. And they felt kind of off at first. Something wasn't right. And they didn't hear any noises that were not abnormal. And that's one of the things that this guy's mom had keyed in on is, and she had asked him, that the Oz effect didn't take place at this point. You know, they had this weird kind of feeling, weird vibes, but there were still the natural sounds of nature. And, you know, they're just poking around, being kids, 20-year-old kids. And so they walk around the radar and realize that, hey, we are not going to be able to even remotely get into this area. Excuse me. Let's keep walking. They had heard of some bunkers, and there's an old church that is on the property, but it's not a church. Apparently, it's a gymnasium, and it was disguised as a church because of the German. There were a lot of spies in Long Island during World War II, and right up until even during the Cold War. And so they had a lot of buildings just disguised as something that they were not. And they had found that area. They had ended up walking up into this well house and such. And as they got to the church / gymnasium and well house or pump house area is when everything, that weird vibe, that strange feeling, all was magnified. And at that point, all of the natural occurring noises had stopped. Any kind of birds, just instantly, like someone clicked the switch. Now, they had been here apparently a couple times in the day, and they had went there just pretty much to scare themselves. You know, it was almost like, just looking for a rush. You're so bored, and there's nothing to do. So, let's do this. Now, they knew these bunkers were in the woods or set off into the woods just past the pump house. And apparently there's like 2 entrances to each bunker, and there's a couple different bunkers out in those woods. And they had found, they kind of were walking up into this grassy area, and they could see like the knoll, like this hill area, because I guess some of the bunkers actually, which we do know is like the government and military's key thing, is they love to take advantage of the ground. So they will use like a hill and build into that and then down. And they noticed that there was just this slab of concrete and then this natural occurring hill formation. So they're looking around there. They're kind of kicking the concrete to see if they can get in anywhere, to see if it's still hollow. And, it's solid. It's just almost like there's a old account of, in World War II, I believe it was in France, the Nazis were using a old school. And apparently it had sub basements, 2 or 3 sub basements. And I've heard that there were some satanic symbolism there as well. And I guess when the Allies, the Americans, came in and kicked the crap out of everybody, they had overrun this school / whatever, and it was a laboratory in these sub-basements. And what happened was the Nazis, prior to getting overrun, had flooded the sub-basements and then poured concrete in the entrance of this flooded sub-basement. So troops, U.S. troops or Allied troops would come down this set of stairs, and there would just be this wall of concrete, and you could still see the water. The Nazis not expecting the Ally force to even want to go in and see, because they'd have to climb over that concrete barrier and then swim down into these sub-basements. So when the Allies did get there, they did have a couple of soldiers volunteer, because they were not going to command anyone to do this. They did want to know what was down there, but I think the thought of how dangerous this was, they weren't going to be like, this is a must do. It was already sealed up. There was water in it, but curiosity. And a couple of guys ended up swimming down in this labyrinth of this basement and then sub-basement of this school or university or whatever the building was. It was a large building. And they get to the sub-basement, and they have some flashlights, which I don't believe anything was working very well down there. But they had found some like weird lab equipment and like some old cages and such, tubes, large kind of enclosures where something may have been held, submerged in water or some other kind of liquid, but they were empty, kind of knocked over and empty. And apparently, as the experience or story goes, both of the soldiers had gotten or had seen something really creepy, and felt, hey, we got to get the hell out of here, and proceeded to swim back out of the area. And I guess they had both made it out of the sub basement and then into the basement. As they are swimming, one of them, they get separated somehow, or something grabs one of them. But the one that makes it out recalls something physically latching onto his leg and causing some excruciating pain. And he kicked and kicked. He knew it wasn't the other soldier, just because how is, a human hand going to cause a burning or prickling sensation? But when he got out of there, everyone's like, where's, da-da-da. And he's like, we got separated, but there's a lot of crazy shit down there. There was, some more symbols, lab stuff, and, just a lot of not good stuff. And all that did was it proved to the Allies that the Nazis, the scientists, were involved in some really crazy genetic experiments, which they already knew, They look at his leg, and his leg had like a large kind of hand imprint, but 3 to 4 times larger than a human hand, and just wrapped around his leg. And it was almost like acid had been applied to his leg, because his skin and subdermal tissue or whatever started to melt away. And they decided, they waited and waited and waited. They did have a rope with them, and they kept pulling the rope for the other guy because both guys were attached to their own rope. And when they pulled finally on that, the soldier who did not come out, his rope finally just came up. They ended up finally sealing the rest of it all the way up, or excuse me, or they knocked the building down. I'm not really sure. There's a lot of different variants to these old World War II stories, especially when it comes to the supernatural. But yeah, it just, so they used that concrete to seal off that bunker in, I believe, France. So they used it again in all of our bases and bunkers in the United States to keep either people out or to keep things in from getting out. So these kids are down in the woods by these bunkers, and they find the entrances. They're kicking to see if they're hollow, see if they can get in there. The Oz effect has kicked in. Everything's dead silent. And at this point, they realize that they're not alone. They have not made eye contact or any visual, but they can hear a growl. They can hear breathing. And they look up into the trees. And what he told his mom was these things were not what the typical Dogman looked like. These were almost like a genetic kind of creation. He said they were the size of a small humanoid, 5 to 6 feet in height, basic human size, but small for a Dogman. And they did have canine features, but how they maneuvered was very similar to chimpanzee or monkey, as they were, because these were not on the ground yet. They were not standing on this bunker. They were in the trees, and there was quite a few of them, maybe 6 or 7 of them in the trees, red eye shine and growling. And they were all growling, and it was a mixture of just a terrifying sound. You've got 6 or 7 of these genetically created dogmen. He said that any description to his mom, he said any description that he has ever heard of what a dogman looks like, he said the one description that fit what we saw that night the most would be the devil monkeys, which to me resembles a Dogman. They've got that muzzle. They're very aggressive. Apparently at one point in Maine, I believe someone claimed to have hit one, and there is a picture of a dead, strange looking creature on the side of the road, in like a late 70s, 80s film, like photo film. But they're in the trees looking down at these kids, and the kids realize, like, we are screwed. These things are all around us. We've been walking in and around Camp Hero for 45 minutes, putzing around. They're about 15 minutes from their car. And how these things are moving in the trees, these two guys are at a disadvantage for speed and agility. All the best they can do is run like hell and hope for the best. And that's what they chose to do. These things chase them. he said, I remember running past the pump house and thinking, all right, we've got, the church / gymnasium. And as he's running, him and his friend are yelling to each other, and he's like, I don't think that there's any trees just past this area. I think there's a clearing by the gymnasium, and we should be able to pick up speed at that point, or these things are gonna jump onto the ground and possibly be even faster than what they are in the trees. But even in the trees, these kids were no match for the speed and agility for these creatures. So they get to pass the pump house and get right to the church / gymnasium. And it really does resemble a church. There's like the way the pitch and design of the building is, these things jump from the trees, which is a good distance, 20 feet maybe, and hit the top of the building. And they're all on top of the building. They're letting out these growls, these shrieking sounds. It's absolutely terrifying sounds. And the two boys just keep running. And I say boys because they're, 19, 20 years old. They're boys. I'm 50 almost. They're hauling ass out of there, trying to just get out of there alive. They just wanted to fart around and scare themselves. They didn't want to have some sort of creation scare them. As they are running for dear life, they then get to back onto Colonel Dunn Road, and the road, I guess, how the trees kind of almost a tunnel, but not fully. And these things are now back in the trees. They realize, though, that one or two is now on the ground chasing them. And he said to his mom how they ran was so strange. It was so chimp-like or primate-like, where they would push off with their back feet and catch with their front hands to propel. They were fast that way, but not as fast as the Dogman running would be. And not as fast as these two kids either, thank God. But the ones above are actually they've actually made it ahead of the two boys. And they're still, shrieking, growling, and sounding a cross between a primate and a dog. Red eyes shining. And just a lot of commotion. Just a lot of just terrifying noise. They're yelling to each other, how are we going to get out of here? They're in front of us now. They're behind us. They're everywhere, is pretty much what he said to his mom. They were everywhere. And there was only 6 or 7 of them. But as they're running, and they are essentially everywhere, two kids and 7 of these things, or even 6, is 2 on the ground, 2 in front of you in the trees, and maybe 2 behind you in the trees. That would be everywhere, essentially. They continue to run, and as they run underneath the couple that are in the trees that were ahead of them, they thought that the ones that were ahead of them were going to drop down onto them and attack them from that point. But they ran right underneath them. The 2 had been chasing them, are now back up into the trees. Because as they're running, they look, one looks back and realizes that the other two went up into the trees. They didn't drop down, and they proceed to run. They have to go around the radar station because of how they came in. It's not a straight shot to where they were. And they now think that they're in the home stretch, but they're also thinking, if we are in that home stretch, this would be the prime time for us to be caught by these things and to not make it home. They do get to the radar station, and as they are going around almost to, they can see their car in the distance, and they see the whole lot of these little creatures. And I say little because they're not as big as a Dogman. Max 6 feet compared to an 8-foot Dogman is, there's a big difference, especially how they're running and propelling themselves, but still very much canine-like. They get to this kind of where the radar tower sits on a sandy dirt, not a mound, but you are essentially in very similar terrain to like in the Cape Cod area where they had thought they had seen black panthers and such. Sand dunes. This is essentially a sand duned area with dirt, but they are now in that, watching these kids run. That's taking some time out of their speed, the boys' speed, and they think now we are either at the home stretch and these things guided us out of here, or this is where they wanted to do the attack. They get past the wall of the radar tower, so they're past it, and they're a good 30 feet from their car. And they get to their car, and as they're jumping in the car, they start it up, and they back the car to see where these things are. And all of a sudden, they are bombarded with branches and any kind of debris that these creatures can throw at them from a tree, old dried out sticks, whatnot, just getting hammered. And they back out, and the passenger side kid, he's looking in his rear view, or the passenger rear view, and seeing them to make sure that they're not chasing them. He sees them run back into the area where the trails of Camp Hero are. And he thinks at this point that they are good to go. But they do see Red Eye Shine looking back at them, not chasing them, thank God. He gets home and is pale as a sheet. His friend is with him, and they tell his mom what had transpired that night. And she's apparently just stuffed it down and thought about it. Her son and that kid have, some PTSD. They won't go to that area anymore. He won't even go into an area where he could be alone for more than 5 minutes in the woods, which I mean, I've had some pretty scary shit happen in the Adirondacks up here, but you know, it's pretty insane. And that's and the crazy thing is were these things genetically created? You know, that's his mom's thought on that, was how his description varied from the description of the Dogman. But yet the characteristics were pretty similar too. So it's a tough one. So were they created on Montauk? Or were they summoned or pulled through a portal by the Montauk boys on the Montauk chair? They did have creatures that were pulled through these portals and via usage of their minds, you know. So pretty intense experimentation that went down on that Camp Hero. So, which then this brings us to the next piece of information: Project Superman, with a gentleman named Andy Pirro. All right, so Andy Pirro was unwillingly subjected to mind control program, offshoot the Monarch Project, a trauma-based mind control program similar to what Kathy O'Brien describes in a autobiography by Mark Phillips, Transformation of America. Not transformation, but transformation of America. Pirro claims to have been created through a combination of genetic manipulation, trauma-based mind control, and Silva mind control training, resulting in superhuman feats and psionic abilities. In addition to this, Mr. Pirro alleges to have been unwittingly used in covert assassinations as a Manchurian candidate, and also in missions connected to the Montauk Project, such as time travel. Pirro first went public with his experience in 1998 as a guest on Preston Nichols while at a lecture hosted by Bob Ewer in Philadelphia. I was so astounded by Andy's testimony that I interviewed him personally so that this story could be shared with the readers of Unknown Magazine. For those who are unfamiliar with me, I have worked for 10 years investigating and counseling UFO experiencers, abductees, and occasionally survivors of various forms of anomalous trauma, such as ritual abuse and mind control. Because of my background in alien abduction, paranormal and the occult, and anomalous trauma, I recognized Andy as an extraordinary survivor of trauma-based mind control, one whose story should not remain hidden. So he essentially was a super soldier. That's what this Project Superman is. Andy, where are you from originally, and when did your training begin? I was born in Fallon, Nevada, 1969, November. My dad was a lieutenant commander at the Fallon Naval Air Station in Nevada at the time. I believe my first experiences began by the time I was 2.5 years old. At 5 years old, my family lived in Munich, Germany, and I remember attending 2 distinct kindergarten classes. One in German that was located on or near McGrew Army Troop, Army Base, and another in English. I have flashback memories of sessions as early as the age of 2 where I was subjected to shock treatment or needles inserted into my ear and slash. What they, controllers, handlers, do is use extreme trauma to separate the mind from the body. They do this to split the mind into several parts that can later be programmed to do things like superhuman feats. Basically, they disconnect all the normal human brain impulses, emotions, and whatever is normally present, then reprogram new ones. They do this to remove all fear, so that when they program the new abilities, You will not have the instinctual, but I can't, I'm afraid response. So when they do, they reprogram that. I can't. I'm afraid that you don't have that anymore. The program you do. They program you to do, not think. In essence, they treat and program your mind as if it is a computer. Who are the people running these programs, like the Monarch and Montauk? Our own government. One of my handlers who tried to brainwash me into believing that he was my dad was basically a Nazi. I nicknamed him Adolf because he was very Aryan looking. Basically, there are underground bases located across the United States. Each one has different function and specialty. There is a facility in Rochester, New York, Parmas, New Jersey, Dobbins Air Force Base in Atlanta, Georgia, Camp Hero in Montauk, and many others. In Parmas, New Jersey facility is where they do programming for female agents. For the most part, 99% of them are involuntary agents or couriers who are raised in various mind control projects. This one is interesting. Much of my training and sessions were done right at the University of Rochester, New York. They used to take me to a private room in the attic or the top floor of the library. A big lab where I had the most of my reprogramming or programming done to me was at Rome National Air Force Base in Rome, New York. They also used the Montauk chair while at Camp Hero. So this Montauk chair and program was unbelievably dangerous. And it is, I mean, do I believe that this, when everything went to shit that one day at Montauk, that it really did close down for good? Yeah, it probably did. But they probably moved much of their experimentation to different bases. I recall being subjected to electroshock numerous times, being placed in an enclosed water tank and told to breathe underwater. Consequently, I drowned several times and would revive because of my self-created healing pool in my mind. I learned to create my own mental laboratory through the civil mind control. Repel with the super powerful healing pool that could heal any injury. I was forced to endure suffering beyond belief to accomplish superhuman feats of strength and survival. Tell me more about this various superhuman abilities you discovered you had. The trainers would put me in a trance whereby I be told that I could jump off a ladder of minimal height. In my mind, I believed that I was only jumping off a footstool or a short ledge. In actuality, I was progressively led to jump higher and higher heights, to the point of successfully jumping off of buildings and even out of planes without a parachute. When under mind control, I could do whatever I was instructed to do as long as I believed in them. I would do 200 or more push-ups in perfect form, sometimes as long as a half an hour straight, or until I was told to stop. I weightlifted 545 pounds on a barbell and squats while attending the hospital. Unbelievable. Attending college. I weightlifted 545 pounds on a barbell, squats while attending college, and much more. 500 to 1,500 pounds while I was under mind control in the training laboratory not far from Rochester. In my jumps, it was as if I was falling like a cat, calm and cool with no fear, focused like a laser only on the landing. Next question. Are there others like yourself who have similar training experiences? I think there are thousands of other children and people who are used, and many end up missing. Many die in the progress. They are considered expendable. The ones who can survive the most rigorous programming live on to become what are known as the Montauk Boys. Duncan Cameron is such a person. In general, the boys and the young man are trained to be couriers, assassins, and center soldiers, and even psychic killers. The women are mostly used as agents. Kathy O'Brien's story is an example. What kinds of special missions or time travel experiments do you remember? I recall being on a small Rochester airport, being picked up in an F-16 fighter plane, ending up in some southwestern desert terrain, either for special military training and obstacle courses or assassination missions. I remember seeing other men in black t-shirts and pants on the same mission. Other times I found myself in an aircraft carrier out at sea. After the mission, they would take me back and I would return missions when done between the time I was 15 years old and until 1992 under deep hypnotic programming with the memories erased until some of the memories started to return. I was also taught to handle various types of guns, loading, cleaning, special characteristics of each model, and firing for exact targets repeatedly and perfectly without thinking. Tell me more of your involvement in the Montauk. I was involved in an offshoot of the Montauk project called the Montauk Chair. Basically, the chair was developed to give the human and spirit a zero point of reference to facilitate time travel. What the chair essentially does is separates the mind from the body. The chair operator thoughts are vibrational energy picked up by an umbrella-looking antenna above the chair, sent to the computer, over to a processor, then amplified several hundred times. They mentioned Duncan Cameron. Duncan's story starts out as being part of the Philadelphia experiment. He is sent back in time and stuck. He ends up, I think he falls off of the boat. So, no, they go forward in time, excuse me. So 1940s, 43, I believe was the year. I may be wrong, probably am. But they go from point A, which is in the 40s, or, 40s, I believe, to 1982. Duncan Cameron essentially jumps off of the ship in 82, where he sees his alternate self. And then he is then reprogrammed, put in the Montauk chair, and summoned a creature. Right here is where his experiences match up to Piro's. Have you ever encountered any extraterrestrial or seen any aliens in any of your underground base memories? From what I understand, the Department of the Navy made an agreement with the alien Greys to exchange technologies for human women and children to conduct horrific breeding experiments. This is what's going on right now in an underground base not far from Miami, Florida. One of the most disturbing memories is being escorted down a hallway in an underground lab, seeing cages of chicken wire fencing with women and children screaming for help. I have seen gray aliens, 4 feet in height, tall ones with large, thick eyes, and also 7-foot-tall reptilian beings in some of my experiences. I have been told that I have many children from alien breeding experiments. I've had abductions with the alien Greys also. On one occasion, I was first abducted to the Reptilian being a while in the underground base sometime in 89-90. I saw a tall, 7-foot tall human, Aryan looking man. He walked toward me. I noticed that his image phased out as if something interfered with his energy field. He does something to a device on his belt and tells me, okay, I will show you. Then pushes the same button and I see his image change into a 7-foot tall lizard-like creature who looked like he weighed over 400 pounds. I was introduced to the group of beings that claimed to be a subgroup of the Illuminati. They were made up of a group of 40 to 50 men, all 6'2" and taller, white, and of the indeterminate order, age averaging 70, I would suspect much older considering the technology they have access to. So this next part goes along with Puro and Duncan Cameron. Their experiences they had while in the Montauk program and Monarch program. This is from the Reptilian case files that I have from TAL, April 7th, 1999. Having been within arm length of reptoids, I did get to observe various details. They wore no clothes, but they did have a utility belt with several unusual things on it. One device had a small orange light on it. When this was touched, they simply disappear. I have quickly moved into spots where the reptoids were. Instantly after they disappear, there was no temperature anomaly in the zone. I had experienced it to be cooler in the area. They did change density at times. They made heavy footsteps in the hallway, wood floor. They could walk through walls. They glowed. Electrical, bluish green, some kind of aura. The head was similar to a reptilian, like the TV program Babylon 5. The head was more cone-shaped, like a yeti. In fact, the reptilians are built like Bigfoot. The one has scales, the other has hair. The eyes are slit serpent-like, very strange, flame-like, flickering, 3 fingers with an imposable thumb with claw-like talons. Small tail, very, very large scales, like a breastplate on the chest. The scales were smaller than the body. Scales were like a snake, serpent race. They were telepathic. This is strange right here. But if you fear them, they will taunt your weakness and will disrespect you. Careful. Don't disrupt them either. They are no better than you. I glean they want something we have, something in our soul, nature. We can shift to a thread of balance and link to the source. They are too far into analyzing, unbalanced. They like drugs like cocaine, opium, magic mushrooms, and or milking. The force. Okay, so the cocaine, magic mushroom, endorphins, they can't get into your mind without having an opportunity to get into the reptilian brain. They know a lot about the outward form of creation. They know the force. But behind the source, they need us. We don't need them. They will appear in England to Tibet. Then it will return 13 years later. Draco Prime are white and albino. the Draco, horned, winged. Those are the two prime races, essentially. So, you've got to think about this really quick. I've got all these case files. You've got Puro, you got Duncan Cameron, you've got multitude of experiences, like, from all of these books. I mean, the Montauk Files, the Phoenix Conspiracy, all the way to the Montauk Project, time travel materializing a beast, teleportation to Mars, and mind control experiments. All of these tales and or experiences, they all match up to anything that, like, it's so nuts. And it's almost like with cryptozoology, right? How do you deny so many people that have seen so many things through so many years? People have been seeing these creatures for hundreds of thousands of years. You can't deny it. It's in history, it's part of our history. And then how are these things living among us without us knowing, Because they are very capable at deceit. And then if we find them out, they probably send one of these Project Supermans to hunt us down. Yeah, pretty crazy. And there you have it, folks. I hope you all enjoyed today's upload as much as I enjoyed sharing it with you. I'd like to thank you all for supporting the channel. It is your support that helps the channel to continue to grow and go, and what gives us all a place and a chance to share these experiences and theories judgment-free. Everyone is simply treated with the respect that we deserve. Please stay safe, happy, healthy, and ever vigilant, keeping an eye on our children, pets, family, and our friends. These creatures are real. These events have happened. Share this information with those you love and care about, and it may just help save their lives someday. Until next time, never stop asking questions, never stop searching for the truth, and God bless you all.